Hello, Brendan. Welcome to the A World of Difference podcast in Montreal. We are here in Silicon Valley, and it's just wonderful to have you on the show today. How are you feeling today?
Life is great, Lori. Thanks for having me on the show. And life is always a gift. You'll never catch me in a bad mood. It's pretty rare. How about yourself?
No, I'm not a up and down person necessarily. I'm pretty even keeled in terms of personality, but I can't say that I don't have bad days. Actually, I do. And I'm trying to lean into a little more of just embracing sadness when it comes my way instead of pretending it's not real because well, it doesn't do me well. It doesn't serve me well, and I've realized the body keeps the score. Either I deal with the stuff or it just somehow I get a migraine or something happens. So I'm just trying to embrace all the feels. It's not my forte.
I love that quote. The body always keeps the score. I have to remember that one. That's really good.
Actually, it's not mine. I will not take credit. There's a book and you should read it. It's very thick. You can do an audible version if you prefer. But yeah, The Body Keeps the Score is a really good book written by a psychiatrist or psychologist. I'm trying to remember. And it's sort of a very well-known book, especially if you've walked through any kind of trauma, which it's hard to escape life without any trauma. But it's one of those things whether you've experienced psychological trauma or emotional trauma, even spiritual, that your body actually keeps the score on that. It's this bizarro thing. It's not like you've been, and if you've been physically hurt, of course, you recognize that. But even just like the things that come into our brains, our body can respond because it's all just connected. So, anyway, highly recommend the book. It's not an easy read because it's dealing with traumatic things, but it'll help you if you've ever walked through anything or you're about to walk through something. It'll help you understand you're not absolutely crazy. Your body really is reacting to those things, and it helps you know how to care for yourself in a better way. So, thankful for the book, and I will pass that wisdom on to you.
I
So,
love that, Lori.
yeah. Anyway, don't want to start off talking about trauma because that's a super downer. But we definitely are excited to have you on today. And all of our audience around the world, we love getting different perspectives on here. And so we'd love to know a little more about you, Brendan, and your background. Obviously, you're a public speaker, but what is it about your background that sort of led you into the work that you do?
Yeah, for sure, Lori. So for me, the story started in business school, where when I wanted to be an accountant, which is literally the opposite of what I do today. I wanted to be a numbers guy, just be like a CPA. That was my goal. So I go to business school, and I start doing these things called case competitions. Think of it like professional sports, but for nerds. So while the guys my age were playing like football or rugby or baseball, I wasn't really one of those guys. I did presentations competitively, Lori. That's how I learned how to speak. But then as I got older, I started coaching all the other students on how to communicate and convey ideas, and I accidentally got really good at coaching other people on how to speak. So then a few years later, I had the idea for the YouTube channel because I felt, oh, well, nobody really has access to this information for free. So I started making videos in my mom's basement. I called it Master Talk. And then a few years later, it turned to something I never could have imagined.
In Silicon Valley, we have a lot of things that were born in garages and I think more recently, even mom's basements. So, shout out to all the moms for letting your sons and daughters hang out in the basement to be creatives. It's used to be this kind of shameful thing, but I mean, I don't know what your property value is like in Montreal, but ours is very expensive. And so, letting your kids hang out a little longer to be creative and start their career in an unusual way is not always a bad thing. So, shout out to your mom. What's your mom's name?
My mom's name is Vijay, and yeah, an Indian community, or at least where I'm from, South Asian community, the rule in our family is actually you never leave the house until you get married. So it's a very different approach than American culture. I actually still live with my mom, but mostly
Aw.
to take care of her these days, but just financially so she can retire. But that's really the philosophy we've always had. So yeah, definitely agree with the basement analogy.
Love it. No, it's so true. My family lived in Asia for
Mhm.
20 years, Indonesia 10 years, and Singapore 10 years. And that was so common. My husband actually grew up in Thailand. He went to international school, Bangkok. And yeah, we were shocked like how white Americans, and I assume it might be similar up in Montreal, that they just want to kick their kids out at age 18. Like, you better go make a life for yourself, you know? But it's like, I mean, we know people like they work at Google and they're very successful in Singapore and they still live in their HDB flat with their parents in Singapore. Because until you get married, or until in some Asian cultures we lived in, you have your first child, like you might be married and still live with your parents, but there's no real reason to move out. It doesn't even make sense financially, especially Singapore. The property value is quite
Huge.
expensive
Yeah.
too. So yeah, people would often live with their families and their parents until they had their first child, even. And it wasn't like a shameful thing. It was just like that makes sense money wise, like, you
Yeah.
know, sharing food, sharing the home. So we are so on board with that, even though we were kind of weird white people. It's like people are like, wait, you're supposed to be kicking your kids out at 18. It's like, I thought I would be that parent, but I'm kind of like, you know what? There's all different ways. And we raised our kids in Asia, and whatever they end up doing is fine. We're just embracing the differences as we do here. Well, it's lovely to hear that you have this incredible career. You taught people public speaking skills. I would love to know um, how you mentioned how you developed your own public speaking skills, but what advice do you have for people who might struggle with public speaking? That's kind of a common thing for people.
Absolutely, Lori. So here's the way I think about it. Mastering communication is like mastering any other skill. So let's say we want to become more fit. So sure, we could look at calorie counting. We have a very customized diet plan. But at the end of the day, the first step is, are we walking 15 minutes a day? Are we getting some fresh air? Are we eating more fruits and vegetables? So how does that principle of simplicity and practicality now get applied to communication? So for me, Lori, communication is like juggling 18 balls at the same time. One of those balls is eye contact, one of them is body language, one of them facial expression, storytelling, and it can get really complicated and overwhelming really fast. So for me, the question has simply been, what are the three easiest balls to juggle? So I'll give you the first one. If you want the other two, I'm happy to share. But the first ball is the random word exercise. Just pick a word like cup, like silver, like home. Create random presentations out of thin air. And there's two reasons for that. One is it helps you deal with uncertainty because life is filled with it. And the second piece is if you can make sense out of nonsense, you can make sense out of anything. So that's why I encourage people to do that every day.
Okay, well, you gave us a teaser. We want the other two. I'm sorry. We're just going to have you say all three.
No, you're totally fine, Laura. The reason I never say all three right away is because I don't want to monologue for 10 minutes and the host just looks at me. That's why I always pause after the first one. So yeah, absolutely. So 2 and 3 is number 2 is the question drill. So we get questions all the time in our life, Lori. Friends, family, work, podcasts, but most of us are reactive to those questions. We're not proactive to them. So I'll give you an example. A few years ago, when I started guesting on podcasts, I sucked. I was really bad. I remember some guy asked me, where does the fear of communication come from? And I looked at him, Lauren, I was like, I don't know, dude. London? New York? Like, you tell me. Like, I have no idea. So I became more proactive, meaning every single day for 5 minutes, I just answered one question that I thought the world would ask me about my expertise until I had an answer for everything. And that's how I mastered the question drill. So if you just do that every day for a year, you'll have answered 365 questions. And number 3 is the video message. Just pick 3 people you really love in your life, especially in the context of your show, and just send them a 20-second video note to just say, hey, I'm really thinking about you. I love the impact you created in my life. I hope you're having a beautiful day. And if you just do that 3 times a day for a year, you'll have changed the lives of 1,000 people and you'll be a lot better on camera too. So there you go.
Ooh, those are really unique and wonderful tips. Thank you. Very practical. Everybody can do those things. You know, there's a lot of people that listen to this podcast that are doing all kinds of things all around the world. We have people working in business, nonprofit, government, education, faith-based spaces, all kinds of situations around the world. But a lot of people that listen, they themselves are doing presentations or speeches. How do you personally recommend people prepare for a presentation or a speech?
Absolutely, Lori. So there's 2 parts to that. The first piece is what I believe to be the most important takeaway, which is, are we booking 15 minutes in our calendar every single day to do the easy threes? Because the big challenge that most people have is they'll listen to looking, oh, Lori, wow, this Brenden guy really knows his stuff. Like the random word exercise, pick a word like cup, do the question drill, 1 question every day. Oh, I never thought about that. Video messages. Oh, I never sent my grandmother a video message. I should probably do it. But then they don't do any of the exercises. So they don't get better. That's why for me, ball number 4 is the best way to speak is to speak. So I encourage you every day to do this. And for those of you who think you don't have time, remember, everybody showers every day, hopefully. That's what I'm hoping, anyways, for your audience.
Right.
Right? You got 15 minutes there. Just do it. Right? And that's how you get the result. So now let's tackle ball number 5, which is your question around speech preparation. So there's an exercise I teach, Lori, called jigsaw puzzles. So obviously we know what a jigsaw puzzle is, those pieces that we used to play as kids. So the question for you, Lori, and it's not a trick question by any means, is when you work on a jigsaw puzzle, 500 pieces, 700 pieces, 1,000 pieces, which pieces do you start with first and why?
You start with the easiest ones because once you get those, then you can figure out the harder ones.
Absolutely, correct. Right? So the easiest ones are the ones we work on. And in the context of puzzles, that's the edges. And the reason is because they're easy to find the box, right? They got the little edge to the put around, work your way into the middle. So now the question becomes, why don't we apply that frame, that logic that we just talked about in presentations? Because most of us, what we do is we shove a bunch of content in our presentation. We get there, we ramble throughout the whole thing, and the last slide sounds something like this. Yeah, so thanks. Instead, right, what you want to do is practice the edges. Do the introduction 20 times, 25 times, like a jigsaw puzzle. So just do the intro, which only takes a minute or two, so 30 minutes. Same thing for the conclusion, 25 times for the close. And then, because what's a great movie with the terrible ending? Terrible movie, right? So then we go to the close, and then we tackle the middle.
Nice. Yeah, like a puzzle. It's so similar. It's very good advice. So, can you walk us through, like, if you were going to prepare maybe a speech on a TEDx stage? We have people that listen that have already done these or maybe preparing to do one. They're doing the edges, they've done the beginning, they've done the end. How do they tackle that middle part?
Absolutely, Lori. So there's two parts to that. The first one is understanding what the key idea is. If there's only one thing that people are going to take away from that TED Talk, what do you want that thing to be? So, for example, in Simon Sinek's TED Talk, his big idea is start with why. Don't start with how, don't start with what. Nobody remembers how you do something or what you do. They only care why you do something. So always start with the why. That's the key idea. That's what we remember from the speech. And he repeats that over and over again throughout the whole presentation. So it starts with, for us, what do we want that key idea to be? And the best way to figure that out is to literally write out 15 or 20 different key ideas of what we think it is. It's a messy process, right? There's no silver bullet here. Because after we finish puzzle, then we tackle the messy middle. And then what happens is we circle one of them and that becomes our key ID. So that's one piece. The other piece now becomes, what do we do for the rest of the middle? To keep things really simple today, Lauren, all we have to do is what I call 3 to defend. So 3 to defend just means, what are 3 things that we can talk about in this presentation that helps prove out our key idea, where people at the end of our presentation do 3 things and during the presentation. They'll listen to our ideas, they'll take action on those ideas, and they'll share their ideas with other people. Let me give you an example of what I mean. If I just wanted people to listen to my ideas, when you asked me the question around speech structure, I would have just answered it. But since my goal is to get people to take action with the ideas, which then eventually leads them to share it, notice how I took a pause in the conversation and I said, are you guys booking 15 minutes in your calendar to actually do this? And the person's like, oh no, I'm like taking notes. I need to actually implement this. So a couple of people who are listening to this book time their calendar. They'll do the random word exercise, let's say their 7-year-old kid, and they'll start telling other families about the exercise. That's how ideas spread. Whereas a lot of people, when we create a presentation, we just focus on point number 1, which is what am I going to say, versus how is that message actually reacting and affecting people. And then the last piece to that is split testing. There's no silver bullet here. Essentially what you want to do is you want to try a story, you want to try an analogy, you want to try a metaphor, you want to try a statistic, and see what works best. I'll give you one easy example. For me, my big thesis every time I appear on a podcast, every time I'm on a stage, is just to inspire people to believe that they can be a great speaker. That's it. And there's so many things I've tried. Tried statistics. The fear of death is closer to the fear of speaking. I've tried all of this, and you know the one that works the best is my own story. You know, I grew up in a
Mm.
city in Montreal where I didn't even know how to speak the language because you need to know how to speak French in Montreal. So I grew up speaking a language I didn't know. I have a crooked left arm, a physical disability in my left arm whenever I speak.
Mhm.
And actually, well, even outside of when I speak, I just have one. And I
Right.
studied a subject that has nothing to do with speaking. So that it's not that I knew that was the answer. Sorry if I'm being long-winded. It's just the point of how to get there.
No, not at
But
all.
it's about saying I tried 75 other things, and then that story resonated because the audience would always go, "Oh, my second language is English." I mean, if you could do it, I could totally do it too. So there you go.
That is inspiring. You know, it's very consistent with this podcast. We're often talking about, and I've said this in multiple interviews with multiple people all around the world, the narrative method is very powerful. In fact, we had a woman who started a company called the Narrative Method on the podcast, and she has these little conversation cards that she sent to me. My husband's a marriage and family therapist, and he's leaning into narrative method for trauma therapy with people. And I myself worked in Indonesia in the big tsunami and earthquake that was there in 2004. And it was just basically letting people tell their stories is how people heal from a traumatic event. And so, even when I was being coached in a career change, my career coach said, in an interview, you want to have some stories you can tell because there's like what, 7 stories out there in the world or something like that. And we all relate to whatever story we're hearing. And it is a hugely powerful motivator, which is why we love movies and we love books with story. So honestly, it's not a shock as to why this works. And that's like you said, there's no silver bullet, but story is something we remember and we resonate with, which is why I love podcasting because we can hear people's stories. So thank you for sharing yours. You know, you've mentioned basically, you know, this master talk that you kind of developed in your mom's basement, and now you're doing this as a career, and you believe everybody should have a master talk. Can you explain kind of what that is? Like, how could everybody develop something like that on their own, and why is it important?
Yeah, for sure, Lori. So for me, the mission of what I do is I believe the next Elon Musk is a 7-year-old girl who can't afford a communication coach. So that's why it's really important for me to become this generation's Dale Carnegie and democratize the information around speaking in a way Dale couldn't when he was alive. So obviously, for context, when Dale, the guy who wrote How to Win Friends and Influence People, because of the era he was alive in, he couldn't really guest on a podcast. He couldn't go on a YouTube channel. We actually don't even know what he sounds like. So because of that, it's hard for somebody later to then learn how to speak from somebody who we can't hear speak anymore. So I have this interesting opportunity in my life where I learned the trick of the trade really young. I started developing expertise really quickly, and I get that opportunity to hopefully, I guess we'll see how things play out, to share that information with everyone in the world at scale. So that's the mission. In terms of why communication is important for everyone, here's the way that I think about Lori. For me, communication is not speaking at TED. It's not going on a big stage and presenting. That's one component of it for sure. But for me, it's every moment of your life. It's the way you talk to your family. It's the way you raise your children. It's the way that you make new friends. It's every little moment of your life. And when we realize communication improves the quality of one's life, we get better at it. That's why the question that I always ask people to think of is, how would your life change if you were an exceptional communicator? So much of comms is so fear based and negative, whereas me, communication makes people's lives better. That's why I call it the accelerant of dreams.
Oh, I love that. It's so beautiful. And when your vision, you know, I'd read that about a 7-year-old, the next Elon Musk. Although we hope she's not an Elon Musk, because around here, I'm sorry if Elon Musk is listening to this podcast, although I highly doubt it. He's not very loved around here in the Bay Area. A lot of people quit Twitter, and the job I had last year before I'm in the current one is near Tesla, and you know, people aren't super happy to work there. Let's hope that the
Yeah,
next Elon Musk isn't a poor 7-year-old girl. But anyway.
you get
Let's
the
hope she's a
idea,
little
right?
nicer. Yeah, we hope
Right.
she's as inventive, but like a little nicer to her employees, a little more humane.
For sure.
But
Absolutely.
anyway, that book, How to Win Friends and Influence People, my daughter, when she was a 12-year-old girl, bought that book. COVID had just been going a few months. We were still in shutdown, and it was 2020. We made a road trip up to Portland, Oregon, and there's a big bookstore called Powell's Bookstore, and it's a very famous used bookstore that's a whole city block, and they had, you know, quotas of people that could be inside masked and everything, and we told our kids, you can all go in and get 2 books, And that's one of the books she came out of there with, is How to Win Friends and Influence People. She could not afford a career coach at the time or any kind of coach, but that book, yes. So I hope she does not turn into Elon Musk, but but I do hope that she has the same, and I think she is, as innovative. So all the 7-year-old girls that may or may not be listening to this, we believe in you. And if your parents are listening to this, we hope they're inspired to see the potential in you too through everything Brenden's sharing. I want to ask you this. I'm curious to know, what do you think are the most important qualities for a really good public speaker?
For sure, Lori. So a good way of explaining this, going back to the 18 ball analogy, is somebody who can juggle all 18 balls effectively. That's probably the easiest way of answering that question, in the sense that that person practices uncertainty a lot more effectively than others. They've done the random word exercise a lot. They send a bunch of video messages, so they're a lot better at speaking on camera. And then all of these skills start to stack on top of each other. Right, balls 5 to 10 is like ums and ahs, getting rid of those, eye contact, vocal tones, and then when you get to 18, let's say towards the end, is more like storytelling, right, where you put it all together and you tell great stories. But the general idea, I would say the trait that separated the best in the world from everyone else, though, from a practice perspective, is that generally speaking, the best communicators usually speak on one or two topics. That's how they get good so quickly, because there's so many different nuances to communication. Let's say we take a Tony Robbins, a Brene Brown, like they're great examples of this, where they're always speaking on the same topic all the time. So because of that, they're able to juggle those balls a lot more effectively than the rest of us, because the rest of us have to keep switching presentations. Like in school, we got English, we got math, we got science, so we're always presenting different things. And then we're at work, our projects are changing, our mandates are changing. So the secret is really find a repeatable process, a repeatable presentation. So if you're an executive, it might not be at work, maybe it's at a pro bono initiative that you do for little kids, right? Because you love teaching them project management on the weekend. That's one. If you're the CEO of a business, obviously it's your own company. But when you find that repeatable presentation, it's a lot easier for you to keep reiterating it for progress.
Yeah, that's very insightful, and it resonates with any of us who have done speaking. It's certainly much easier to talk about the same topic over and over again. Your brain can get really good at it, and but when you're switching all the time, that's much more. Yeah, it takes a lot more work, and it's not as smooth all the time, is it? That's really insightful. I want to switch a little bit here just to talk about building Master Talk and that process. We have entrepreneurs that have been on the show. We have many that listen, both business entrepreneurs or people who are starting nonprofits, starting all kinds of projects or initiatives around the world. And so I'd love for you to talk about some of the biggest challenges that you face in building Master Talk and how you kind of overcame them.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we could do a whole podcast on this, but I'll give you kind of the main two or
Yeah.
three. So one was definitely ageism. I had definitely a lot of struggle closing a lot of vice presidents and people who had the money to afford, let's say, a coach, to get them to trust me over somebody who might be 20, 30 years older than me. So that's a challenge I had earlier. I'll just list them all out. The second one was the stubbornness of distributing the media content. So I had a stupid idea that we can talk about how I sent 50,000 emails to university professors. I'll tell you why that was a terrible idea. That's the second one. And then the third one was just ignorance. I didn't really understand what business was. And luckily, I found the right mentor who kind of guided me through that. So let's go through the three. So the biggest challenge, of course, was ageism. How do I close deals at the time when I was 22 and 23 to get executives to trust me? Of course, now that's not a big challenge anymore because most of my business today is word of mouth. In communication coaching, I'm lucky where if you work with someone and they communicate better, people ask them like, "What happened to you? Like you're like a legend at communicate." And then they point to me and they go, "What? This guy? Really?" And they go, "Yeah, absolutely." So that's not a problem later. It was a problem earlier. So how did I fix that? The way that I fixed that was by selling B2C, not B2B. So if you're on the younger side and you could build a B2C business, usually speaking, I would opt for that, especially in coaching. I'll tell you why. Because if you go to B2B, you have to convince the company, the board, the L&D department that you're the right person for the job. There's so many hoops you got to jump through, so many sponsors you need. So that's a tough game to win. You could still win, but it's tough. B2C, I just need to convince the executive in front of me to buy into me. And that was actually not as hard as people think, because a lot of my first clients, they were people who had worked with coaches in the past and didn't get the result. So when I came, they said, "Why are you any different, especially given your age?" I just told them, and goes back to Alex Hormozzi's point, give them an offer that's so good that they can't say no. So I just thought, I'll just coach you for 2 hours for free, and then you tell me if I'm worth my salt. So that's how I built the book, and then obviously word of mouth spread. So that's one. The second bottleneck was me being stubborn around these 50,000 emails. So I'll tell you my brilliant idea. For those who haven't caught on, I'm super sarcastic right now, which is I was thinking, okay, I'm making these videos and I didn't have them in university. So now that I'm out of university, why don't I just share them with university professors and then they just share it with their students? And it's just unlimited distribution because they'll just share it with the new students that they keep teaching. Sounds good on paper. But in practice, it was a horrible idea because every time I'd send them cold emails, they would spit in my face. They'd be like, "You're young, you don't know what you're talking about. I don't care about your videos. I don't care about you. I don't even know who you are." And I got met with a lot of resistance. But the mistake that I made, the lesson, was don't be stubborn in your own strategy. I should have stopped after 500 emails. Why did I keep going for 50,000? Like, versus, by the way, a podcast host, which is a demographic I didn't understand at the time. The podcast host is always looking for new guests, always interested in new ideas that are fresh, and is personally incentivized to be a better communicator because they want to show up better for their audience. Like, duh, but that makes so much better more sense. And then the third challenge was just ignorance. For I think I coached for 4 or 5 years. This is my 8th year coaching. I started when I was 19, Lori. But it was only in probably my 5th year that I started making money from it because I didn't even know you could charge for it. So my business partner is the person who kind of turned me on to the idea that executives pay thousands of dollars for this service. So ignorance is just you pay that down by just having mentors who are smarter than you. So there you go.
Oh, thank God for good mentors. Yes, I have definitely had so many that have said, "What in the world are you doing?" Or "You might want to consider this," and have pointed me in the right direction. We need that. And we want to give back to the younger generation too. And so I enjoy mentoring as well. I'm actually about to go on Saturday to Abu Dhabi, someone that I've been involved in her life. She's much younger than me. She's an aerospace engineer, and that is not my field. But my relationship with her has just been, being a woman at work at my age and dealing with some difficult challenges that have, been somewhat similar or just life, we share a similar faith. We actually met in a church here in Silicon Valley. But anyway, she's an aerospace engineer with NASA and was listed as Forbes 30 under 30 this year, and has invited me to go with her to Abu Dhabi this weekend for the International Women's Conference for all the women who received this award. Mentorship is just incredible, and it doesn't have to be about career. But I find that often mentorship, even if it's in a career setting, just helps us be better people. The right mentorship is really, I think when your business flourishes, you have a chance to flourish. And if your business is one that helps others flourish, which is what yours is, you're helping, a lot of people flourish. And mentorship really does have such an impact in that way. It makes a huge difference. What advice do you have? We have a lot of entrepreneurs, as I mentioned, or people wanting to start various types of, initiatives or nonprofits. Maybe they're trying to make a difference in their school and they're trying to start a club. Maybe they're young, maybe they're 19 and they're in college. What advice do you have for aspiring entrepreneurs of this type who are looking to start something?
Absolutely, Lori. So what I'll focus on is advice I feel a lot of people don't share, so that it's valuable. Because usually somebody who wants to be an entrepreneur is fully committed to doing that. It doesn't really matter what we'd say on a podcast; they'll just do it. So mostly, I feel the challenge to solve is the person who sees themselves doing both. I'm not sure, should I do a job? Should I start a business? And they're kind of in that in between. So here's the advice that I actually implemented in my life because I think I'm more of a majority case where it's not like I'm the burn all ships and I kind of jumped head first and I parachuted. I took a very different approach to entrepreneurship because I was allergic to it. I actually never saw myself as a business owner. I believe there's two types of owners. The first one is the born entrepreneur. Somebody who's just, it's in their blood. Like their parents are entrepreneurs. This is what they want to do. It's what they've always wanted to do. I'm the complete opposite. I actually, as much as somebody wanted to be an entrepreneur, I actually want to be an executive. It's like, I'm the best number two in the world. I'm going to be a partner at IBM. I'm going to be a partner at McKinsey. Like, that's my dream. That was my entire focus. It's just communication. That's what I always like to say. Communication, I didn't choose it. It chose me. So what happened? Basically, the advice is side hustle comfortably. Because statistically, most startups fail, my advice is always find your zone of excellence before you find your zone of genius. So Gay Hendricks has a book called The Zone of Genius where he talks about kind of what is the trifecta between what you're good at, what you're passionate about, and what the world needs you to do, right? That you'd be really good at. But the challenge is it's really hard to optimize for that when you're 19. Like if you had told me at
Yeah.
15, hey, figure this out, I wouldn't have arrived to be a communication coach and professional. So instead, what I do is I recommend people find their zone of excellence, which is something that you can get paid a decent amount to serve your family with, and that you're really good at, generally speaking. So for me, that was being an accountant. Get something really stable, and then when you have something stable in that journey, you'll make a unique set of decisions, and you'll start to create leverage in your life. And then through that leverage, now you have the option to pursue entrepreneurship if you want without risking anything. So what happened with me was I got a great six-figure job at IBM, worked there full time, saved like 90% of my money because like we discussed earlier, I live with my mom, right? So we're all
Right.
paying the same mortgage. And then I gained a lot of leverage, and then I had the idea for Master Talk. Somebody told me I could do coaching full time. Oh, let me hustle this on the weekend while I'm making good money. And then I just kept hustling until I'd replaced probably 40% of my income. I had clients and I had a clear plan to replace the rest of my income because I was the only breadwinner when I quit my corporate job because I provide for my mom and my sister. So I didn't want to quit until I was secure. So that's the advice I would
Yeah.
share.
Man, that is spot on. I just think that's such a great plan. And I've heard that advice from more than one person. Obviously, being a podcast host and going to podcast conferences like PodFest and Podcast Movement Evolutions and that type of thing, I meet a lot of people where podcasting is a side hustle and is often connected to business or speaking and that kind of thing. And I think that is straight up good advice. And your journey of being a sole breadwinner for your family is so young. It's a really beautiful journey. I just commend you for being there for your family in the ways that you are. I think it's very inspiring. I think you're making such a difference just in your own little household there in Montreal. But fortunately for you, you've been able to make a difference in the lives of many people through your speaking and coaching. And I would love to just let you have a chance to let people know where they could find you and how they could reach out to you if they're looking for coaching.
Absolutely, Lori. It's such a pleasure to be on the show, by the way. Thanks for having me. So, two ways to keep in touch. The first one is the YouTube channel. You can just type Master Talk in one word. You'll have access to hundreds of free videos on how to speak and communicate ideas. And the second way to keep in touch is you can jump on one of my free communication trainings. I do a live Zoom call every 2 weeks that everybody's invited to. You could be an 8-year-old kid, the CEO of a $1 billion company, like the both sides of the spectrum are there. And it's a party that everyone's invited to. And you can register for the next one at rockstarcommunicator.com.
It's a great name, rockstarcommunicator.com. And I agree. You are a rock star communicator. And that is just
Thanks.
like the most perfect name.
We got so
We're going to
lucky with
link
the
that in the
domain.
show notes. Oh, I bet you did. Yeah. What year did you actually start it?
The website that we got it, I think 2 years ago. I've been doing the channel for probably 4, coaching for 8, but the domain, my business partner Vamsi was amazing. He's my 50-50 partner, and he's the guy who has more wisdom than I do, and he kind of helps me on the business side. He found rockstarcommunicator.com for like $10 a year. We're like, wow, the biggest
Oh
steal.
my gosh. Wow, I love it. So much about the entrepreneur journey is just having little moments of just lift like that. You can't predict those, you can't plan for them, but they're wonderful when they happen. And I'm so glad you have a great relationship with your business partner. Collaboration and bringing in our differences is just it's the key to everything and when you're trying to make a difference in the world. And it sounds like you've already figured that part out. So congratulations to you. We wish you all the best. And we hope that if you're not in our Patreon community and you want to hear the exclusive interview we're about to have with him, just to ask him a question just for our Patreon supporters, then you can join us there. And we're going to sign off for now with this interview. And then if you're in our Patreon community, then you can join us there for this little exclusive interview. So thanks for being on the show today, Brenden.
Thanks, Laura.